watching the nation's best college newscast. 11 News at Noon starts now.
Provo re-election. Mayor John Curtis is staying for another 4 years, and he says he's got big plans in store.
Bye-bye Beck. A newcomer ousts a Provo City Council member, and by a big margin.
And Orem underdog. The winner of the tight fight for Orem mayor is a surprise. How he plans to tackle the city's mounting debt.
I'm Mark Chalice.
And I'm Randall Vaudry. Welcome to 11 News at Noon. The people have spoken, and all across Utah County, new leaders are moving into office, and others are starting another term.
That's right. One of those staying is Provo's own Mayor John Curtis. He beat out his opponent to get another 4 years, and it wasn't even close. 86% for Curtis to only 13% for challenger Jason Christensen. 11 News reporter Sarah Chamberlain was with the mayor when the results came in. They must have been pretty excited about that.
Yeah, I saw a lot of smiling faces at the city center last night where Mayor Curtis held his party. The mayor is really proud of what he has accomplished so far and says he still has big plans for Provo's future.
Mayor John Curtis started his election day like many other people in Provo by casting his vote. Now that the ballots are in, Provo gets another 4 years of Curtis in the mayor's office. His supporters came together last night at the city center to celebrate the re-election.
I don't think it's much of a surprise, actually. I think John Curtis has done a really good job in town, in Provo. Google Fiber and all that.
Results show that more than 5,000 votes went to Mayor Curtis, while Christensen totaled less than 1,000. The re-elected mayor says the overwhelming show of support motivates him to work hard in his second term.
We want to do a lot for the students. We're still working on parking and towing issues that I know are important to the students. We're going to see a lot of development in our downtown, even more vibrancy. It's going to be a fun 4 years.
Instead of a party, Curtis's opponent Jason Christensen spent part of election night picking up campaign signs around Provo. He says with Curtis in office, he's worried about rising utility bills and abuse of property rights.
In the coming months, if not next year, things are going to get much, much worse. Things are already bad, but things are going to get much worse.
Christensen says he doesn't want his supporters to stop fighting for change, but those who voted for Curtis are confident his next term will be just as good as the last.
Mayor Curtis also mentioned how reassuring it is to have such a large percentage of the vote in his favor.
Yeah, 86 to 13%, that's a big margin. Were they expecting that, or was that a surprise?
You know, I would say it was really expected. I know I talked with a lot of voters this past week, and most of them were in support of Curtis winning and wanted him to be reelected.
Yeah, well, apparently that's exactly what happened. Thanks, Sarah.
Provo's highly contested City Council District 5 race ended with an incumbent out of office. Stephen Hales took the council seat from Sterling Beck, who solidly with 2/3 of the vote. 11 News reporter Sydney Carlson was at the Hales headquarters. Now, Sydney, what does this mean for Provo?
Well, Sterling Beck has been representing Provo's 5th district for the last 4 years. But now that Stephen Hales has the seat, he says he wants to focus more on the neighborhoods in downtown Provo.
Dozens of supporters gathered Tuesday night at Stephen Hale's campaign headquarters to join in the victory celebration. Hales defeated incumbent Sterling Beck with 67% of the vote in Provo's 5th district.
It seemed like there was a lot of support out there, but we didn't run any polls. I'm just grateful that it turned out the way that it did.
On paper, the councilman-elect's biggest obstacle was finances. Beck's campaign had twice as much funding, but Hales noted that gathering donations from Provo businesses and families gave him an advantage. Hales' money came almost exclusively from Provo voters, while more than half of Beck's funds were from donors outside the city.
We may not have a lot of money in this downtown area, but we have heart, and we know how to work with one another and work together.
Beck wouldn't go on camera, but said over the phone he wishes Hales the best and offered to help him transition into his role as councilman. Beck also thanked the people of Provo, saying it's been a pleasure serving the last 4 years.
He was very gracious tonight. It's a hard thing to lose an election, and I'm grateful for the work that he's done for the city.
Hales says he wants to focus on sustaining Provo's recent growth. His plan is to bring new businesses to downtown Provo that will boost the city's economy while maintaining the historic feel of downtown Provo.
Hales also said he wants to be an advocate for lower-income people in his district. Live in the newsroom, Sydney Carlson, 11 News.
Now, Sydney, Hales signed up to be a candidate for this race just 10 minutes before the deadline. So this is obviously quite a turnaround for him.
Yeah, after a lot of encouragement from people in the community, he decided kind of last minute that it was something he needed to do, and it turned out all right for him last night.
Yeah, it definitely did. Thanks, Sydney. Only one other Provo City Council race to report on, and the results could not be closer. Take a look at these numbers. Only 60 separate apparent citywide seat winner David Sewell from opponent Ryan Franson. The city still has provisional ballots to count, and Franson says he's hopeful that will swing the results his way, so the next race may not be over just yet. Kim Santiago will fill the council seat from Provo District 2, and she ran unopposed.
Next door in Orem, there was no incumbent, and the mayor's race turned out to be one of the tightest of the night. Richard Brunst beat Chris Nichols in the tightly contested election with almost 54% of the vote. 11 News reporter Sam Hancock was at the Brunst headquarters to capture the winning moment.
Orem voters showed up early at the polls with divisive tax increases on the ballot and the mayor's seat up for grabs. Vote counting went into the early morning, but came out with a bit of an upset.
People in Orem are setting course in a new direction for the next 4 years, but not under the leadership most were expecting. Underdog candidate Richard Brunst is sitting on top as Orem's new mayor today.
Richard Brunst, our next mayor of Orem.
Upsetting frontrunner Chris Nichols.
I'm excited to continue to work on those issues. I'm excited to work with the city council, with the city manager, with the employees of Orem, and with the citizens of Orem.
Brunst entered the general election with less money and less support than his opponent. Nichols won the primary back in August with 46% of the vote to Brunst's 27%. But the mayor-elect says nothing is impossible if you're willing to work.
We've walked many, many miles of the streets of Orem and met a lot of great people, and we worked as hard as we could.
Brunst will need more of that hard work. Orem has growing concerns over the mounting debt from Utopia, decreased revenue and sales tax, and the unfinished eyesore of Midtown Village. Brunst was all smiles despite the long road ahead. The same couldn't be said of Nichols when what seemed to be a promising night turned to nervousness, then defeat.
Well, clearly we're disappointed. We thought we had a good message, but clearly the voters have chosen differently.
Nichols admits the end result was a head-scratcher, but says he wouldn't do anything different.
Brunst says his first order of business is to get to City Hall. He wants to make as many friends as possible with city employees, saying that means they can hit the ground running and make Orem great again. Mark?
Thanks, Sam. More from Orem. One city council member there will sit this next term out. Newcomers Tom McDonald and David Spencer will join incumbent Brent Sumner on the city council. They're the top 3 vote getters, which means incumbent Mary Street did not win re-election. Sharon Anderson and Wayne Burr bring up the rear. The vote on renewing the city's so-called care tax passed overwhelmingly, meaning a 0.1% sales tax will continue to fund arts and parks. Orem voters also strongly turned down a property tax increase 2-1.
Plenty of new mayors will take office in northern Utah County, including one write-in candidate. Don Watkins of Alpine beat out incumbent Hunt Willoughby in a close race. Watkins took about 57% of the town votes. Another close race in American Fork, incumbent James Hadfield took almost 54% of the votes to beat out challenger Bill Thresher. In Highland, Mayor Lynn Ritchie didn't run for re-election, leaving 2 new candidates to compete for the office. Mark Thompson came out on top in a close race, capturing almost 55% of the votes. Linden also had 2 new candidates for the mayor's seat. Jeff Acerson beat James Slade with more than 60% of the votes. And in Pleasant Grove, incumbent Bruce Call lost to write-in candidate Mike Daniels. Daniels took more than half of the overall votes, beating Call by a healthy margin. Several cities in southern Utah County also have new mayors and council members. In Spanish Fork, Steve Leifson won by several hundred votes over Chad Argyle for the mayoral position. Current Mayor G. Wayne Anderson did not run for re-election, so Leifson will take over his spot. In Springville, the race for a city council was a close one. Each candidate got almost a quarter of the votes, with Chris Sorensen and Craig Conover marginally beating out Joyce Nolte and Karen Ellingson. People in Elk Ridge chose to keep their mayor. Incumbent Hal Shelley handily beat challenger Jamie Taus, winning more than 70% of the vote. And in Goshen, voters also chose to re-elect Mayor Fred Jensen. He won over hopeful Stephen Staley by a sound margin of almost 18%.
And we saw both sides of the scale in western Utah County, from complete landslides to extremely tight races. In Lehigh, Mayor Burt Wilson held onto his seat with a solid win, getting nearly 63% of the votes, so he'll continue as mayor for another term. Further west, Saratoga Springs Mayor Mia Love did not seek re-election, leaving the door wide open. Jim Miller narrowly squeaked out the victory over Brandon McKay, winning 56% to 43% of the votes. And Eagle Mountain was the complete opposite story. Christopher Pengra won in a 1,000-vote landslide over incumbent Heather Jackson, who only received 923 votes.
We'll broaden our scope and look at some of the bigger races and ballot issues statewide when 11 News at noon returns. Also, inmates testified. Sorry about that technical problem going into the break. Now, inmates testified people who shared prison time with Martin McNeil say he bragged that he could get away with murder. But first, voters weighed in on a broad spectrum of issues across the state, voting on everything from school bonds to alcohol sales. In the Jordan School District, voters struck down what would have been one of the biggest bonds that Utah has ever seen. The district intended the $495 million bond to facilitate the booming number of students in the district. One of the last Utah cities to shun alcohol sales will now accept them. People in Hyde Park voted to allow alcohol sales in the city by almost double the votes, with 859 votes in favor of sales to 481 against it. And West Valley City's Ron Bigelow beat out his contender Karen Lang in their mayoral race by almost double the votes. Bigelow getting overwhelming support with a 60 to 39% victory. The inmate who shared a cell with Martin McNeil in the Utah County Jail testified in that murder trial this morning. Former cellmate Jason Poyer saying McNeil bragged to him about killing Michelle McNeil. It came about when Poyer noticed McNeil got special privileges like having special shoes. Poyer said he asked the former Pleasant Grove doctor if he could get similar benefits for himself.
He said, "No, you can't." And I said, "Well, how do you get away with that?" And he's like, I can get away with a lot of things.
What else did he say?
And he goes, for instance, like, I'm getting away with my murder.
Poyer also testified that McNeil said he was glad his wife was dead. Defense attorneys tried to discredit his testimony, questioning Poyer about his criminal history and past lies to probation officers.
Now, this isn't your average road trip. The longest stretch of interstate in the country with no services is right here in Utah. 11 News reporter Matt Rascone shows us what it takes to survive the long drive.
It's the curves, you know, and the uphill incline, and it's just a long drive.
Long is putting it mildly. 110 miles of no services, no towns, and not even cell phone service.
It'd be nice if they had some other ones in between, you know, because then that way it's not such a far commute.
That's why every day, dozens crowd the Phillips 66 off of I-70 in Salina.
Panic. I can't go 110 miles without using a restroom.
Or without food and gas. This is your last chance. Robert Nolan knows. He's driven the long stretch of road in rain and shine as a trucker and in the family minivan.
I don't like running out of gas. I've done that before.
And on this long, windy, hilly road, Robert is certainly not alone.
I've had people run out as far as right out on the road, 5 feet from the pump, as far as 60 miles back.
They walk all the way here, they hitchhike here, and they like, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you." And the reason why is because they have no gas.
That's because heading west on I-70, it's so easy to just keep driving. No services for more than 100 miles. That's no joke. This is your final warning to fill up, so if you miss this sign, and you might be out of luck because this sign doesn't come until 3 miles after the last gas station.
It's past the exit. It's like, seriously? Who thought of that?
Good question. But when heading east, there's one sign in particular that gets people's attention.
We saw the big sign that says, "No bull, last stop." And we decided, oh, heck no, can't go 110 miles without stopping.
Even so, some still end up at the Phillips 66 on foot.
You think it's kind of a joke, but believe me, that no bull sign is no bull.
And unlike other gas stations, a top-selling item here is the gas can.
The most I've sold to one person is 3 cans.
And they're not cheap. Just one costs nearly $30. But when you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, you really don't have a choice.
It takes a long time to get through.
Like so many others, Robert has learned his lesson. Always stop. In Salina, Matt Rascone, 11 News.
Well, that's probably the only time I'd ever spend $30 on a gas can.
Yeah,
can of gas.
Yeah, and Kathleen, it doesn't even come with gas in it, so that's a pretty crazy price.
Well, even if you have to walk across the state, you're going to have some nice weather here coming this weekend. I'll let you know more with 11 weather when we return. Welcome back. And right here, if you're looking right here, it's not as bright. November isn't really as bright as October was last month. Here we've got a little bit of gray, and the trees are even kind of turning a little bit brown here, but maybe brown like burnt orange. But that's November, and it'll get even less colorful as we go into winter. Right now it's 45 degrees in Provo with about 39% humidity, and the wind's blowing just a little bit, about 5 miles an hour. So it's not blowing too fast, but it's just enough to have like a nice cool fall breeze here in the air going on. Later on tonight, it'll drop down to about 34 degrees with it'll just be partly cloudy with some winds happening around. So it'll maybe be a little bit windier than it is right now, but it'll be a little bit cloudier and a little overcast tonight. Right now in Utah, it is mostly in the upper 40s with a little bit with the exception of Moab, Wendover, and St. George being in the 50s and St. George being in the 60s here. But most of the state a little bit sunny with just a few clouds happening in some parts of the state. St. George, however, is not one of those places that it will be experiencing some clouds this weekend, with the exception of Thursday. Today it'll be the coldest that it'll be here later in today. It'll be 63 degrees. Then as we go into the weekend, it'll warm up it'll warm up to about 70 degrees and 71 on Saturday there. Northern Utah, it's a little bit colder and even more clouds happening here. It'll be partly sunny and partly cloudy here in the beginning of the week, and with the temperatures being in the mid to high 50s. And then it'll warm up on Sunday there. It'll warm up to about 60 degrees. So this weekend is actually going to be just in the mid 50s, and it'll be kind of breezy.
Yeah, I mean, even with the clouds, it's a nice break from the freezing weather we had earlier this week.
Oh my
That
gosh.
was cold.
Yeah, and I can't believe we're saying 50 degrees is warm.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Yeah.
All right, Skylar, women's soccer's on a roll.
That's right. I heard, one of their players even got a pretty big award this month.
That's right, we're going to talk about that. I mean, if all of this election news hasn't been enough competition for you, on sports we'll have the story about the goalie that scored. I'll tell you which member of the women's soccer team earned a big prize this week. And Williams wins. Here's Darren Williams. He's 0-4 against the Jazz since leaving Utah. We'll have the highlights and show you if he could finally beat his former team. Sports is coming up next. Stay with us. The senior keeper for BYU women's soccer team had one heck of an October, and this week Erica Owens was honored for it. The freshly named WCC Player of the Month led the Cougs to a 6-1 October. She pitched 5 shutouts and beat 2 teams in the top 25. During the month, she gave up less than half a goal per outing and had a save percentage of .889. She already started her bid for November's award with a shutout last week. The Cougars host the newest member of the WCC, Pacific, on Thursday at 7 o'clock. Well, and just in case you're a Jazz fan, before we look at the upcoming highlights, I wanted to remind you that typically the worse a team does in the regular season, the better position they get in the NBA draft. With that note, we'll dive right in. Robin Lopez of the Brooklyn Nets is taking young Enes Kanter to school. Man, the big looks good. This time, former Jazzman Darren Williams helps create, and Paul Pierce picks up the assist to Lopez. The result is the same, 2 points for Brooklyn. Looking for his first win against Utah since he was traded in February of 2011, Darren Williams had that in the bag all night long. The Jazz were never close and, in fact, never had the lead. There was a sweet dish from Williams. The Jazz fall to 0-4 this season. It's the first time they've had that record since they got to Salt Lake that first season. That year, the Jazz finished with 25 wins, and they got the second overall pick in the following draft. Joy Johnson ran her first New York Marathon after she retired at the age of 61, and she kept on running for the next 25 years. Alan Wong tells her story.
She would run through all the boroughs, and people in every neighborhood, different people would just be cheering her on all the way.
At 86, she seemed unstoppable. But last Sunday, Joy stumbled in the New York Marathon and hit her head near the 20th mile. She finished the race, but the next day she said she was tired. Joy took a nap and never woke up. The cause of her death is still unknown.
She was a wonderful, wonderful person. We're going to miss her.
While her neighbors slept, Joy was up at 5 a.m. almost every morning running around the Willow Glen High School track where she used to be a PE teacher. About the only thing that surpassed her physical and mental abilities was her kindness.
Oh, she was so good to everybody, so thoughtful, very, very thoughtful.
The running world praised her for going the distance, but Joy Johnson's neighbors say she took her compassion toward others a lot farther. In San Jose, Alan Wong, ABC 7 News.
Joy was on a 3-year streak as the oldest woman to finish the New York Marathon. It's a pretty impressive feat for someone of her age.
That is, and it's sad about her passing away, but man, that's what you call going out with your boots on, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, and you know, it was awesome that she was able to finish the race and, you know, finish doing something that she loved. So that was great. Still to come on 11 News at noon, Bouncing Beast. An elk takes a leap, but will the youngster find his way out? Stay with us.
A new gymnast may be training for the Olympics, but does this four-legged creature have what it takes to be gold medal material?
Oh my gosh.
A Colorado couple looked out of their window to find a young elk jumping around on their trampoline. Not something you see every day. The gymnastics star soon attracted an audience as a crowd of fellow elk gathered in the couple's backyard. It looked like the elk's friends were trying to help, and after a few slips and falls, the elk finally managed to find its way out.
Yeah, it's good. It finally made its way out. But I think those other elk wanted in on that bouncing action.
Yeah, no, it looks like it was fun.
Well, that's 11 News at noon for Wednesday, November 6th.
You can join us anytime on our website, 11news.byu.edu.
Thanks for watching, and have a great afternoon.